pour le monde entier. Et voilà, et comme l'année 2021, donc elle pourrait bien marquer les bonnes pratiques pour la planète. Voilà. Donc, for me, I am that is in English. I am Saliha Zerdoum. I am an expert and environmental engineer in sustainable development consulting in Algeria, and I have been involved in environment law, business management certification, environmental education. Voilà, pour vous dire que je suis ingénieure fonctionnaire, donc j'ai pris connaissance du forum des changements climatiques, du Climate Action, dans un groupe de WhatsApp, et heureuse de faire connaissance des amis italiens, spécialement Domenico. Merci. Voilà, donc j'espère partager cette thématique. C'est la thématique donc sur les changements climatiques et surtout en faveur de la transition énergétique. Un petit mot en arabe pour les amis ici présents, Algériens or Arabic, speak Arabic. أصدقائي السلام عليكم. هذه المشاركة تخص انبعاثات ثاني أكسيد الكربون بحلول 2030 ومسار نظام الإنتاج الصناعي والتجاري وكيفية تحوله إلى حياد الكربون. يتعين علينا تقليص التجارة الدولية، الاعتماد على التجارة المحلية، الحد من التجارة البعيدة التي تستعمل المسافات والتي تعتمد على النقل والإمدادات الغذائية إلى صفر كربون واعتمادا على 0 كيلومتر. إذن الانتقال العاجل، الانتقال الاجتماعي يكون بنماذج عمل جديدة تعتمد على الجانب الإنساني، الجانب الاقتصادي والجانب البيئي. هي موجهة إلى الاقتصاد الدائري وتخص مجالات متعددة، منها مجال البحرية بنسبة 3%، مجال الطيران بنسبة 3%، مجال النقل البري بنسبة 7%، والبتروكيماويات والنفط والغاز بنسبة 3%. إذا نحن هنا لنتبادل أفكار في منتدى افتراضي ونحاول أن نتقارب في الأفكار في التحول الصناعي والتجاري الذي يواجه العالم. Ma contribution est pour répondre à la question du savoir si la transition énergétique est possible pour tout le monde, c'est-à-dire dans l'équité, avec les conditions actuelles, sociales et économiques, environnementales. C'est la question de zéro carbone pour tout le monde. Notre Terre est confrontée de plus en plus aux problèmes liés à la détérioration du milieu terrestre et de l'environnement. Les changements climatiques affectent négativement les milieux de biodiversité, de la nature, et aussi l'expansion urbaine qui s'ajoute, le développement industriel et la pollution de l'air, de l'eau et du sol. Donc, les efforts de lutte contre ces phénomènes ne sont pas suffisants à eux seuls. ils ne sont pas soutenus par un comportement exemplaire et civique, efficace et éclairé des citoyens comme des industriels et comme des commerçants et des grandes firmes industrielles surtout. Donc, l'action sociale est irremplaçable dans ce sens, dans le domaine de l'information et aussi la sensibilisation, surtout dans le sens de la responsabilité environnementale qui est notre objectif en quelque sorte. Donc, garder espoir de lutte contre les changements climatiques de 1,5 degré Celsius. Il faudrait réduire les émissions de gaz à effet de serre de 7,6% et par an. Mais la COVID-19 a mis à l'arrêt pendant des mois l'activité de l'économie locale, nationale et à l'échelle mondiale. Donc, les activités commerciales sont touchées et on espère que les émissions sont baissées à peu près. Donc, ce qu'on a pu tirer des discours d'environ 7% du CO2. Donc, principale source est gaz à effet de serre. Alors, c'est aussi l'occasion de parler de la transition énergétique, c'est parler de l'économie circulaire dans la transition, dans le sens transition énergétique. Et donc, c'est aussi parler des productions d'énergie propre, c'est parler des innovations côté recherche scientifique, c'est parler de la distribution et du stockage d'énergie, c'est aussi mobiliser les transports intelligents qui respectent les normes de l'environnement et voilà, et pourquoi pas accès à l'énergie de qualité. L'énergie de qualité conforme à l'objectif l'objectif 7 des ODD, des 17 objectifs du développement durable. Donc, dans la perspective d'accélérer la mise en œuvre de l'accord de Paris, c'est aussi travailler pour une énergie propre et un coût abordable. Parce que la question du coût d'énergie est très importante du point de vue social. Parce qu'on peut atteindre, c'est-à-dire on peut réaliser un objectif, mais reste à prouver reste à voir que les prix seront abordables pour tout le monde. La question des prix et du coût d'énergie classique par rapport aux énergies renouvelables est une question très importante dans la transition sociale. Parce qu'il faut convaincre les foyers, les citoyens du coup, c'est ça la question. Alors, ça concerne aussi le secteur d'énergie qui couvre essentiellement le domaine de l'air. C'est la pollution de l'air, donc la pollution atmosphérique. Donc, ça comprend aussi, ça concerne les acteurs publics, ça concerne les acteurs industriels, et ça concerne beaucoup de ministères, ça concerne des universitaires, des laboratoires de recherche, ça concerne les collectivités locales et municipales. Et voilà, et les citoyens, les jeunes, les femmes, les personnes âgées, les enfants. Donc, c'est une question partagée par tout le monde. Alors voilà, c'est l'un des grands dossiers actuellement en cours et qui comprennent entre autres la réduction de l'empreinte carbone et la résilience et l'adaptation au changement climatique, le cas pour nous, les Africains. Donc, c'est la diminution de la pollution atmosphérique et une mobilité durable avec une valorisation énergétique Donc, c'est des secteurs concernés qui travaillent sur le même dossier et aux finalités, donc c'est pour aussi élaborer des rapports et des bilans et faire des analyses et voilà des colloques à l'université et donc discuter des résultats. Tout ça pour un objectif, c'est promouvoir les avancées technologiques et partager les projets innovateurs. Donc, c'est pour aussi y aller en route du COP 26. Le climat, voilà, c'est la conférence mondiale pour 2021. Et c'est donc 2020, c'est une année hors norme. Donc, la crise sanitaire qui a renforcé la tendance structurelle à la dépréciation des actifs fossiles au profit des énergies renouvelables. Mais on parle peu sur le coût par rapport le coût des énergies classiques et les énergies renouvelables. Donc, malgré la baisse du pétrole et du baril, la demande, donc c'est un peu compétitif. Alors, ce qui se confirme, c'est que la sortie du charbon, elle est confirmée. Alors, la COVID, elle pousse les usagers du transport public et comme elle a mis en quelque sorte le secteur du transport euh, dans, à la page, quoi. Alors, c'est aussi qu'elle a poussé l'année 2020 avec la COVID-19, elle a poussé les usagers des transports marins, des transports aériens et aériens, oui, et publics et qui sont des secteurs de l'économie et des transports de la marchandise, voilà, à réviser leur plan en matière de révision. Donc, c'est ça la question, ça concerne plusieurs secteurs. Alors, la transition à bas du carbone, à zéro carbone, c'est un peu ambitieux. Donc, c'est une compétitivité industrielle et c'est une question des défis et c'est une question aussi des opportunités. Donc, réduire les émissions des gaz à effet de serre d'ici 2030, comme proposé par les rapports et les conventions ratifiées par le monde entier. Donc, c'est prendre des mesures pour la tarification du carbone et d'inciter les consommateurs, qui sont surtout les industriels, les commerçants, les foyers, les inciter à aligner leur comportement avec cet objectif. Et socialement, c'est travailler sur l'axe de la sensibilisation pour que les jeunes et les citoyens partagent surtout l'information sur la transition énergétique. Donc, l'intérêt est de s'engager à réduire les émissions de gaz à effet de serre, et voilà pour éviter les conséquences du réchauffement climatique et de 3 degrés. Le cas, par exemple, du secteur du bâtiment qui fait quand même des efforts. Pourtant, toutes les solutions existent pour réduire rapidement les émissions des gaz à effet de serre. Il y a le secteur du bâtiment qui préfère quand même se lancer, par exemple, dans les bâtiments qui respectent les normes. Et voilà, et atteindre zéro carbone avec une énergie et une ambition positive. Je dirais aussi que réussir une transition industrielle et commerciale, il dépend de la capacité de la région et de chaque région, de chaque pays, à promouvoir des plans, des stratégies pour la compétitivité. Donc, depuis la production industrielle jusqu'à la consommation, voilà, au final, donc, il est possible de créer des nouvelles perspectives et de partager des rêves et travailler avec les professionnels et investir dans les technologies vertes des secteurs écologiques. Voilà, ça profite aux entreprises et pour une meilleure performance environnementale. Et voilà, donc les nouvelles technologies et les modèles économiques innovants peuvent aider à moderniser, à diversifier l'économie locale, réorienter en quelque sorte la base des connaissances et travailler sur cet objectif ensemble and together. Voilà donc non seulement que je trouve le sujet intéressant, mais je trouve aussi grandement de sensibiliser autour et de parler de transition énergétique. Merci pour votre attention. S'il y a des questions, n'hésitez pas à les poser. Merci.
Thank you, Salia. Thank you very much for your speech. And then we'll have the time to make questions. Then I give the floor to Carol, and just after Salia. Carol, if you want, go ahead.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, I shared before some of the results of my ongoing research about the circular economy in the from an industrial perspective in the petrochemical sector. And I just wanted to add to that, since in the presentation I just gave the perspective of plastic producers, so oil and gas company. And I just wanted to add to that, just to give you an overview of my PhD, of part of my PhD research. So in this first part of the research, we analyzed 21 companies from the European Union and their plastic producers, manufacturers, so brand owners, and recyclers, not dealing especially with plastic, but more in general with solid wastes. And we tracked the different circular economy practices from all these companies to understand in which part of the transition they were. We wanted in particular to understand if they already started a transition towards circular economy, if their transition aligned with the trends from the European Union, and in particular with the different legislation that I presented in the first part, in my first talk before, and also with the different social cultural movement. So we wanted to see if the industry were kind of like responding to the social events and social initiatives, such as like cleanups, if they were taking part in cleanups, if they were engaged in awareness and education activities, to understand to what extent they actually contributed to circular economy. And also we tracked if there were any partnership across the supply chain to see if they share responsibility upstream and downstream, like compared to the supply chain stage they covered. So I'm just briefly going to summarize the results of this. And of course, later we'll share the presentation that I shared in the first part of this event. So I saw someone texting in the chat, so you can take a full look to the results. So in general, we notice there are like 5 main circular economy practices across the companies. The first one we call the sustainable plastic materials, which entails the use of recyclable and reusable packaging. And this is in order to recycle and reuse, which are like 2 of the 4 circular economy strategies mentioned by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. The second practice is recycled materials in products and packaging, which mainly deals with the recycled strategies. No, sorry, I'm I'm not sharing right now because it's some
Okay.
unpublished document. Yeah, I'm just like summarizing the results, but all of this is already included in the first presentation I gave. The third one is plant-based and renewable products and packaging, which is connected to the decoupled strategy. Then we have reduced plastic content in packaging and lighter products, which entails the reduce, recovery and reuse of ocean plastic, which again is for the reuse, for recycling purposes. And finally, the phase out of single-use plastics, which is a strategy to reduce plastic again. Then the second group of practices is the end-of-life management. Sorry, I just want to add for the first one, so for the sustainable plastic materials, we found that manufacturers are very engaged on this set of practices. And in particular, most of the companies that we analyzed, they dealt with the use of recycled materials in their products and packaging, and also the introduction of plant-based products, so bio-based plastics. Of course, this doesn't mean that 100% of their production shifted to those. But as of now, they have like some products which are entirely made of recycled or plant-based materials. Then the second cluster is the end-of-life management strategies. And these entail the use of plastics waste recycling scheme, which is a strategies that they adopt at the company level in order to improve recycling. They have waste collection and sorting schemes, so they take care of their own product. Then we have waste reduction and prevention. And finally, the use of EPR schemes, which can be, for example, take back or trade-in schemes, which are mostly common for the manufacturer, less common for the producers, and of course, do not apply to recyclers in this sense. And within this set of practices, we noticed that most manufacturers engage on some recycling activities for their own products, but not all of them. And also some of the producers were keen on this. Well, recyclers deal the most with the recycling activities as compared to producers and manufacturers. The third cluster was the use of a chemical feedstock, which entailed both the investment and R&D in chemical recycling, as explained before, but also the capacity to increase their plant, both in the capacity and operation of their plant, to make sure we are able to fully recover potential from plastic waste. The fourth cluster was information and education. And it entailed both awareness and information initiative, but also environmental campaign, such as collaboration in the World Cleanup Days, or different like cleanup initiatives. And in terms of information and education, we noticed that besides recyclers that were engaged in this initiative, sometimes also working with schools to better educate the consumers to store and separate waste at home. We noticed that producers and manufacturers poorly engaged on these two practices. So we think like there is need for more attention, and this goes perfectly hand in gloves with what we said before. So the lack of like engagement on awareness and information. So there is a missing, let's say, link between producers and manufacturers and consumers. And finally, we track the different partnership, including partnership with suppliers. Then we have partnership with retailers and distributors to understand if producers, manufacturers were kind of engaged with the point of distribution of plastics, and also if recyclers had any collaboration with, for example, the grocery store to make sure that there is no waste leaking from the grocery stores. And finally, we have technologies, partnership for technology development. So in some cases, we notice an increase in attention, mainly from the producers, to engage with technology company to make sure they can update their machinery and technology system in order to be able to recycle more. So the idea of like tracking these different like practices was to understand if we were going into the right direction. And of course, we can see there is an increasing trend for companies to become more sustainable. And this is mainly driven by the demand, but there is still, we're still lost in this transition, and we're like far from reaching a fully circular scenario in this case. And of course, this only applied to the companies we analyzed. So there is kind of like some data limitation, both in terms of like companies selected and in terms of like geographic region that we select. And the idea is like for the coming year of my PhD to compare this research with different areas of the world. So next comparison will be between how these companies operate in Italy, where I'm currently based, and compare with Western Cape, South Africa, since like they're really doing a great job on awareness and education and exploring new circular economy pathways. So I wanted to explore how South Africa is doing, and if the companies are able to, receive the message from consumer and actually implement that in their own businesses. And finally, I wanted to compare to the Beijing province to see how the situation changed after China enforced the ban on plastic, and if now that they have, let's say, fewer plastic waste, they're actually able to increase their recycling standards. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol, for the presentation. Then, Teresa, if you want just to share maybe your experience with circular economy and circular economy activities.
Yes, thank you very much. Can you hear me well?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, compared to my previous speakers, I have not prepared a presentation because I assumed the internet would be too bad on the train. But I'm happy that the train is allowing me to participate. So yeah, maybe I've already talked a lot about what I do and what the company does as I work in and what I do voluntarily. So I think one thing that I would like to share is basically reinforce the point that we talked about earlier about basically the power of consumers. During my work, I've basically gotten more in touch with the topics of recycling and waste, which is really interesting because who thinks about waste on a daily basis? Usually no one. And suddenly you become interested in how waste management plans look like and how that all works in logistics and so on. So it is a really interesting experience, I have to say. And one of the things that I can tell you from the research that we do in our company also to develop our product further, and the research that I do in the NGOs that I work in, is that there is literally no good reason for companies to start using recycled plastics. I mean, I guess Carol can confirm this, but when we look at plastics, especially the easier types of polymers, it is a lot harder to recycle them than it is to just buy oil and produce new polymers. This is not only the reason because of the industrial processes that Carol already mentioned that are necessary for recycling plastics. It is actually also relevant because we actually have to collect major amounts of plastic, and not just of plastic, but also of the same type of plastic. Which is extremely relevant as well because additives and colorants and flame retardants actually destroy entire recycling batches regularly because they're not identified, and it is often impossible to see what this plastic contains. So there are two things that we need. We need, on the one hand, information of all products that are made. That is extremely relevant because if there is no possibility for companies to actually share this kind of information, there's no regulation that basically makes companies share this kind of information about their products, then that will extremely harm the recycling processes that we have and make circular economy really more difficult. The second part, so that is basically something that I think is extremely relevant to push for, to really make sure that we are encouraging companies to share this information and really making sure this kind of legislation is put into practice, because this is obviously not something that should just be based on the good interest of companies. The second part, as mentioned earlier, there is literally no good reason for, I don't know, Nike to start making shoes with recycled content, for Coca-Cola making bottles with recycled content. It is more expensive for them. It is actually hard for them to get recycled material, and it is actually a lot of hassle for them. We even know of companies that buy PET bottles, new PET bottles, shred them, and then put them in their products and say, oh yeah, this contains recycled material, because they cannot buy the same amount of recycled material. Actually, used PET bottles are actually quite valuable currently because they're the easiest to use in products. So what does this tell us? This tells us that we have to make our products easier in order to really allow better recycling, because PET bottles are, in the countries where they are collected, they are actually recycled almost fully. And secondly, it also tells us what kind of a power consumers actually have. If companies, despite the higher costs, despite the higher investments in the selection, in the basically sorting of the material and the basically gathering of the products, if companies still do this and still use recycled content in products, it is purely because consumers pressurize them to do so. It is purely because they know that there is this amount of consumers that want those kind of products. So yeah, that's as like a little encouragement for you to think about it and see what are the sustainable choices that we can all make to really realize what kind of effort we can make, and what kind of impact we have when we do those kind of things. And a second part is something that is actually even difficult for myself, looking at the fact, for example, that there are festivities in my country coming up in this upcoming week. Circular economy doesn't just start with making products more circular design or recycling, repairing, and so on, making all those things possible. But it actually, again, starts with the consumer. And that means we have to stop buying. And that is relatively hard, especially in such a culture where we are buying a lot, where we always have huge Christmas presents, huge presents for any festivities in across different cultures, across different religions. I mean, gifts are something that we have everywhere in the world, and also in our day-to-day life. I mean, we often have incentives to buy new products despite being able to repair them. So it's two things. On the one hand, really encouraging the people around us to stop buying things that we don't need, and secondly, seeing how we can actually support the mechanisms and the organizations that encourage the inner loops of the circular economy. For example, if you could just easily call someone who comes around to your house for a small amount of money to check whether your washing machine can be repaired or whether your phone can be repaired, then we would probably all do that more often. But often we have something that is like slightly broken, but we don't really know how to fix it. So I think those are the most important points to really encourage as consumers to stop buying things we don't need and see what kind of repair cafes or repairing, refurbishing activities we can support in order to make this like a structural system that makes it just as easy to call someone to check out whether a device can be repaired as it is to just order something new online. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Teresa, for also your sharing. And now I'll open the floor for question, comments to the speaker. Again, very thanks to Salia, Carol, and Teresa for sharing this insightful experience of circular economy. So the floor is for the participant to question, interaction, and so forth.
I can speak to this without the camera, if that's okay.
Yes, go ahead.
So going all the way back to just alternative biomass and what we're even, in the whole life cycle of the food we eat, the materials we need to take from Earth, from the resources, and then in order to have the products we are so used to. Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Is just like, what can we do to do more? Is there, advocating as environmentalists in government levels, or going to the COPs and trying to raise awareness or put pressure on the governments? Or is there a way that we can think of spreading the suggestion of, I love it if there was a directory of, how to extend the life of my washing machine, for example. But beyond that is really the education, the culture of, I was recently visiting my home in America, and I heard so many times the word disposable. Disposable cutlery is one thing, but disposable furniture, that's what they were calling it. They're like, oh, we just got a new couch, and because we just painted the wall red, so we wanted a gray couch, and yeah, well, just in a year or two we'll just get rid of it and bring a new one. It's more about the age of the mentality, the norm, the culture, the way I see it. And this is a bit of what I was talking about before, the top down, bottom up. Just I'm wondering what your research has shown for us to be able to shift the culture of the mentality of everyone, from the farmer who's feeding the cows to the consumer who's buying the dishwasher or washing machine. That's how can we spread this? How can we make it go further? Thank you.
Thank you, Sol. Who wants to respond? Maybe we can take a couple of questions, and then eventually, or Carol or Teresa or Salia, if you want to add something. In the meanwhile, I'll share a document that we are currently sharing on each track. Also, and this is an invitation also for the speakers to give your inputs and insight about industrial transition, and particularly, of course, on this track on circular economy. So I have one question for all the speakers indeed. Do you think that there are some like barriers also in the national laws that prevent from using, I don't know, the second life matter, so-called, to implement properly the circular economy? Or do you have updates on that? If, I don't know, the current European or the legislation in your country is given the possibility also to implement the circular economy, don't make barriers, for example, on the second life matter?
I can take Domenico question. I just wanted to bring two examples that I found during the review of the companies, and one is from Italy. And for example, in Italy, some types of plastic packaging are not included in the packaging waste directive. So we're supposed to throw them in the trash and not in the plastic. And that is like, taking away some potential for recovery, material and value for that. And I know in particular in Lombardy region, they're kind of, trying to update this regulation in order to recover full potential from packaging where possible. And just to give you an overview, in Italy, we have some national waste regulation that they're supposed to align with the European Union ones. But then we have like several regions, and each of the region is responsible for managing waste locally. And then after the region, we have next step, the municipalities. So some of the regions are taking the lead to make sure we update our the taxonomy and the code we give to waste to make sure we're able to recover full potential for that. But that has been like a limit until now. And then I found another example from the Netherlands, and maybe Teresa, you can comment or like give more inputs on that. And I found that in some places, like there's different regulation between like let's say different levels, institutional levels, and sometimes it's up to the municipality to take care of waste management. But having like so many different levels in the literature, they say this can be a major challenge, because of course we kind of fragment responsibility. And there are examples in the literature of some cities where like waste management didn't work properly because the responsibility were so much fragmented that it was impossible to follow up and make sure that the waste properly transition from the consumer to the recycling facility. So I think sometimes this misalignment between like policies at different level can be a major barrier. And of course, I'm sure that there are like many more examples if we look at our own countries, and we can bring it.
Thank you, Carol. Does someone want to add something? Or eventually we can wrap up and closing the session. Okay. So if there aren't any other inputs, I will warmly thank Carol, Salia, and Teresa for joining the session, and hope that also for you it'll be nice to participate to the Climate Social Forum. This is our first time that we want to create this virtual agora, so exploiting the virtual connection to create momentum for discussion and on the topics that we addressed and also. Thank you very much to all. Just now open the mic if you want to say the last thing, also greeting and so on. So like a session for checkout. And for the one that wants to stay, I remember that we are gonna take the plenary of the day. Each day we are like finishing with a plenary in which we discuss the final results of the day and so on. And of course, you are all kindly invited. I will share in the chat the link. And thank you very much. And the floor is yours for closing remarks or things that you want to share. Thank you again, and see you. Bye-bye.